This is the thing. If you can make federal laws to protect the bird, which is the bald eagle, you can make federal laws to protect people of color.
Tonight, the family of George Floyd speaking out at the White House 1 year after Floyd was murdered by a Minneapolis police officer. 365 days later, where does the country stand and how have things changed?
This generation of Americans, this will be their Emmett Till moment.
And can this solemn moment spur meaningful action in Congress?
As much as I wanted it to see it finished by today, I am much more concerned about it being a substantive bill that will really begin to change things in our country.
Our conversation with the lead Democrat behind the George Floyd police reform bill, Karen Bass. And the breaking news tonight on former President Trump. Sources tell ABC News the Manhattan DA has now convened a special grand jury to decide whether to bring criminal charges against former President Trump, his family, or his company. COVID cases continue to plunge, but there's still concern about getting enough Americans vaccinated. One state is using the chance at $1 million as an incentive to get a shot.
And it's really gone better than I could have even ever imagined. 45% increase in the number of people getting vaccinated.
And fury is growing tonight after the state-sponsored hijacking of a commercial jet by Belarus. The mother of that detained journalist making a desperate plea for help to ABC News tonight, fighting back tears, saying the government will kill her son. Back at home, a crackdown on unruly airline passengers. The message tonight from the Secretary of Homeland Security for people refusing to wear masks on planes. And the severe weather danger moves east tonight. Alerts for damaging winds, large hail, and possible tornadoes. Our Ginger Z times it all out. Good evening, everyone. I'm Lindsay Davis. Thanks so much for streaming with us. 1 year ago today, George Floyd went to a convenience store to buy a pack of cigarettes. Some argue that his subsequent death in the minutes that followed changed the world, while others suggest not much has changed at all. What has not changed in the past year is the number of Americans killed by police each day, which averages about 3 daily. And in the past 365 days, the Senate has not passed a police reform bill. But tonight, many of George Floyd's family members remain hopeful. After meeting with President Biden today, one of his brothers saying if you can make federal laws to protect the bald eagle, you can make federal laws to protect people of color. In the city of Minneapolis today, silence for 9 minutes and 29 seconds, of course, the length of time an officer kept his knee on Floyd's neck. A short time before that, the remembrance at the intersection where Floyd was killed was interrupted by gunshots. Floyd's family, including his daughter Gianna, meeting behind closed doors with President Biden today. Meanwhile, Derek Chauvin remains behind bars tonight, awaiting sentencing next month after a jury found him guilty of Floyd's murder. Alex Perez has been covering the story from the very beginning and is back on the ground for us in Minneapolis tonight.
Tonight, memorials are stretching from coast to coast, honoring the life and legacy of George Floyd 1 year after his death. From Los Angeles to right here in Minneapolis, Americans marking the somber day, remembering the 46-year-old father killed 1 year ago today while in Minneapolis police custody. Late today in the nation's capital, George Floyd's family meeting privately with President Biden and Vice President Harris at the White House. When they emerged, they said they were grateful for their time with the president, who they said was sincere in wanting to know how they are all doing. And they said the president remains hopeful there will be a federal law, the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act. It has passed the House, and now Democrats and Republicans are negotiating in the Senate.
He did let us know that he supports passing the bill, but he wants to make sure that it's the right bill and not a rush bill.
But the family is frustrated by the delay.
If you can make federal laws to protect the bird, which is the bald eagle, you can make federal laws to protect people of color.
George Floyd's 7-year-old daughter Gianna in the Oval Office, the president showing members of the family the White House. Late today, the president talking about Gianna.
First thing she did when she ran in, just threw her arms around me, gave me a big hug, and wanted to sit in my lap.
It all came just hours after a moment of silence in Minneapolis and elsewhere across the country, many paying their respects by taking a knee after the governor called for a moment of silence. New York Mayor Bill de Blasio and Reverend Al Sharpton doing the same thing. 9 minutes and 29 seconds, the amount of time former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin kept his knee on Floyd's neck as he begged for air.
We're here today just honoring his life and letting his family know, letting all the families who've been killed by the police know that we don't forget them. We know that their lives were valuable and precious.
Chauvin was convicted last month of murdering Floyd and is set to be sentenced in June. The 3 other officers charged in the case will be tried next year. Floyd's death brought out millions from all backgrounds demanding justice in small towns and large, protesting police brutality and pushing for racial justice. The outrage occasionally turning violent. 1 year ago, we were here at 27th Avenue and Lake Street in Minneapolis, where some areas were reduced to rubble by protesters.
A lot of people here still on edge. And here's what that same intersection looks like today. Take a look behind me here. You can see those buildings are all gone. A grassy field and park now in its place. That Black Lives Matter flag waving in the background. This city is slowly healing from the wounds ripped open 1 year ago.
And late today, outside the White House, the family raising a fist in honor of relatives who could not make the trip. Floyd's young daughter leading those familiar words. Say his name.
Say his name.
George Floyd.
The family saying that Gianna was smiling again during that visit to the White House. Alex Perez joins us now from Minneapolis. And Alex, you've been covering this story on the ground for the past year. Walk us through how things are different now or not so different compared to the contentious early days.
Well, Lindsay, what we've seen the last year unfold is really the biggest civil rights movement that we've seen in the country in decades. And we've seen crowds come out, people of all races across the country trying to fight for racial justice. And that started to happen almost immediately after George Floyd's death. And here, 1 year later, we're still seeing a lot of those same crowds coming out here at this park today, one of several events held to remember George Floyd. And the mood here was somber at times, but it was also a celebration of his life. Many people repeating to me over and over that today, this 1 year anniversary of remembrance of his life, is also a reminder to them of all the work that lies ahead when it comes to fighting for racial justice. Lindsay?
And of course, in the early days, there was talk of defunding, even disbanding the Minneapolis Police Department. 1 year later, what's changed in the Minneapolis Police Department there?
Yeah, Lindsay, those calls were loud. A lot of activists, a lot of key people really calling for the disbanding of the Minneapolis Police Department. But I think what we've seen the last year, what many elected officials have learned, that that's not an easy process. Several other jurisdictions across the country, we saw those calls at those places too, but it really hasn't happened anywhere across the country because it's something that's very difficult to do. A lot of city charters, the jurisdictions have charters that require police departments. So what we're seeing now here in Minneapolis and in cities across the country is sort of the funds being redistributed in some cases towards other social service programs, and also talk about changing how training works for some of these police officers. But that disbanding of the police department that we heard initially a lot of people calling for, that hasn't happened, and there are no elected officials that believe that's actually going to happen. Lindsay?
Okay, Alex Perez, thank you so much. In Washington, negotiations in Congress continue on a bipartisan federal policing reform bill. The two sides expressing some optimism on a deal despite some key differences on the scope of the reform. But as talks go on, some cities and states are taking up action on their own. So where does policing reform across the country stand 1 year after George Floyd's death? Here's our senior White House correspondent, Mary Bruce.
Tonight, negotiators on Capitol Hill say they are finally making progress on police reform. Republican Senator Tim Scott telling us we're starting to see a framework.
I think we're making the kind of progress that we need to make.
Tonight, President Biden sounding encouraged, too.
I've spoken with the negotiators. I'm hopeful that sometime after Memorial Day, we'll have an agreement on the George Floyd legislation. So I'm optimistic.
Biden had hoped to sign a law by today, the anniversary of George Floyd's murder, something he discussed in his meeting with Floyd's family at the White House.
He said that deadline, he's not happy about it not being met, but all in all, he just wants the bill to be right and meaningful and that it holds George's legacy intact.
The George Floyd policing bill would ban police chokeholds, eliminate the use of no-knock warrants, and create a national registry of police misconduct. But the big sticking point, whether to do away with protections that shield officers from civil lawsuits. As a candidate, Biden promised to make police reform a top priority. But once in office, the pandemic and the economy took precedent, frustrating some advocates like Portia Bennett-Bay.
I go off of actions. You know, forgiving student loans and giving the money to help the economy build back up. That's a really great thing. But what about the people who are still having to deal with these problems on a day-to-day basis?
Jacob Blake Sr., whose son Jacob Blake was shot 7 times in the back by a white police officer last summer, sees some progress, but tells us he wants Biden to ramp up the pressure.
He could do some more. The current president and vice president were moving in the right direction. But as you know, like I know, they don't make laws. You know, it comes through Congress.
What will it say if this doesn't get done?
It will say that systematic racism wins.
The White House insists the president is working behind the scenes to get this over the finish line, but also makes clear the onus to act is on Congress.
We have been closely engaged with the negotiators and a range of parties on the Hill. We have also been respecting the space needed for the negotiators to have these discussions about where they can find common ground and where they can find agreement. So we've been closely engaged.
While Washington negotiates, 40 states and the District of Columbia have already passed their own significant police reforms. Maryland now has new laws restricting use of force and requiring body cameras. Helping to lead the charge, State Delegate Vanessa Atterbury.
This type of police reform is going to be incredibly meaningful for so many people that just want to live their lives. They want to feel safe when they send their son out to the store, when their children come home from a party, and they don't want to have that worry.
But it wasn't easy. The Republican Governor Larry Hogan vetoed the bill.
And I think are going to put police officers and civilians' lives at stake.
But Democrats had the votes to override him. For Atterbury, a mother of 3, this fight was deeply personal.
I worry. I worry every single day. We all have that fear of something happening to one of our loved ones. And when we were debating this issue on the House floor, my white colleagues would stand up and say, I don't know how that feels. I will not know how that feels ever. And that's real. I think that's absolutely real.
Baltimore Police Commissioner Michael Harrison is now tasked with implementing the overhaul.
It's a culture change. It's a paradigm shift. And it's new to a lot of people.
Have you found some resistance, or do you feel that everyone is, in agreement on the common cause here?
Well, in the beginning, like anything, people people reject what they fear, and they fear what they don't know. And so in the beginning, it's all about change management. How do we create change?
Many still trying to determine just how to bring about that change. Mary Bruce joins us now from the White House. Mary, members of the Floyd family meeting with both sides on Capitol Hill today as negotiations continue. So where does it seem that things stand right now?
Well, coming out of those meetings on the Hill, the Floyd family attorney, Ben Crump, said that he got the sense from negotiators that this is the closest they've ever been. We've heard from Republican Tim Scott there saying that he sees the light at the end of the tunnel. Of course, there is still no deal, but there is this sense of renewed optimism. So here's where things stand. Essentially, the talks are continuing. They're still trying to hammer out all of these details, and there are still very real hurdles, like that question of legal protections for officers. One thing that we know both sides definitely do agree on, this bill, if they get it done, will be named in George Floyd's honor. Lindsay.
Mary Bruce, our thanks to you. Yesterday, the lead negotiators in Congress on policing reform, Congresswoman Karen Bass, Senators Cory Booker and Tim Scott, released a joint statement saying, while we're still working through our differences on key issues, we continue to make progress toward a compromise and remain optimistic about the prospects of achieving that goal. For the latest on the state of those talks, let's now bring in the lead House negotiator, Congresswoman Karen Bass of California. Thanks, as always, for joining us, Congresswoman.
Certainly. Thanks for having me.
When I spoke with you last month, formal bipartisan talks were getting underway, and you said at the time that you were, quote, very hopeful that a bill would be on President Biden's desk by today. Of course, that didn't happen, but as you keep working toward a bipartisan bill, how close would you say that you actually are to getting this across the finish line in terms of days or months or weeks?
Well, I certainly do not believe it will be months. I am hopeful for weeks. But as Senator Scott said and Senator Booker in our joint statement yesterday, we do feel that things are moving forward. We just need to stick with it. And what was so more important to us, as much as I wanted it to see it finished by today, I am much more concerned about it being a substantive bill that will really begin to change things in our country.
And let's talk about the issue of qualified immunity for police officers, which, of course, protects them against lawsuits, which has been, it sounds like, a main sticking point. Just 2 weeks ago, you said, quote, it's our position that qualified immunity has to be eliminated. I know your main goal is to make sure officers can be held accountable. So is eliminating qualified immunity still on the table in these talks?
Yes, it is. And we are looking at how to hold officers accountable. That is the #1 issue. So one is the public being able to hold an individual officer as well as a department accountable, as well as being able to prosecute officers that commit crimes, because that's one of the major stumbling blocks that causes so much pain and grief for communities and family members who've lost loved ones, that they have no recourse in our legal system. So you will see an officer on a videotape who has brutalized an individual, and several months later, you will see the local jurisdiction doesn't even file charges, does not pursue a prosecution. And that is because of the way the law is structured now, and that's one of the things that needs to change.
And I know, of course, you don't want to negotiate in public, but just want to go back to this idea that you do feel confident that Democrats and Republicans will be able to reach a deal that both sides will accept on this particular issue.
I do. I do believe that that's the case, and that's what we're looking at right now.
And I also want to ask you about a provision that you've talked about many times about wanting to address in this bill, and that's on decreasing the criminal intent standard for police-involved incidents. Is changing that standard something that Republicans are discussing as a part of a final deal, or is that off the table?
Well, again, I won't go into the details, but we are looking at how we hold officers accountable as well as transparency. And so, you know, getting information. We saw the tape from the gentleman that was killed in Louisiana, where the officer said he had been in a traffic accident. That was in 2019. So for the last 2 years, that family has had to grieve with the notion that was a lie, it was a cover-up, that their family member was killed in a traffic accident. 2 years later, we see the videotape and see that he was brutalized. He was beat to death. The officers in North Carolina, the judge, the DA that refused to release the tape to this day, they've only released portions. We have to have legislation that requires transparency. We want to upgrade policing in America where you would have officers accountable like people are in other professions.
And, of course, you were just referencing the family of Ronald Green. We had the chance to talk to his mom and sister a while ago. It seemed like they never were buying, actually, the story that the police were telling them. But just want to ask you this, as we reflect now, 1 year later, since the passing of George Floyd, what still frustrates you, and what also gives you hope as far as any kind of progress that this country has made?
Well, I'm overall hopeful. There's no question about that, because I think so much has changed in the consciousness of people in the United States. I mean, prior to his murder, basically, you would have the black population overwhelmingly who understood that this has been a problem we've been grappling with for generations. And the majority population in the United States that wanted to say, well, you know, it's an individual officer, it's an individual person. There's not a systemic problem. I think there is widespread understanding that something is wrong in the United States in 2021, that on a daily basis, an average of 3 people lose their lives to police in this country. And I'm not saying that that means that in every case it was brutality, it was inappropriate, but in far too many cases, that is what is true. Over 100 people have died in officer-involved encounters since George Floyd's passing. And I reviewed 100 cases, and it's very interesting that the story is almost identical in each case. The person went for a gun. The person was a threat. I felt endangered. The person was unarmed. The person was having a mental health crisis. Is that really how we want the policing profession to conduct itself in 2021 in the United States? I think it's unacceptable.
Congresswoman Karen Bass, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Switching gears now to the coronavirus in the U.S. and more long-awaited good news. Half of U.S. adults are now fully vaccinated, and Moderna has announced that their vaccine is 100% effective for children 12 to 17 in trials. So will we soon have a second authorized vaccine for teenagers? Here's ABC's Eva Pilgrim.
Tonight, a major milestone ahead of the Memorial Day weekend. More than half of U.S. adults are now fully vaccinated.
If you are not vaccinated, I want to encourage you to take this holiday weekend to give yourself and your family the gift of protection by getting vaccinated.
The country on track to reach the president's goal by July 4th, at least one dose for 70% of all adults.
All right, buddy, you ready?
And now adolescents could soon have the option of a second vaccine in addition to Pfizer. Moderna today reporting its trial results show the vaccine was 100% effective against COVID for 12 to 17-year-olds with no safety concerns. Texas ER doctor Denise Burgos enrolled her 15-year-old daughter, Anita, in the trial.
I have a lot of physician mom friends. We were constantly talking about this, and we all really made a push to find vaccine trials and to get our kids into them.
Anita doesn't know yet if she got the vaccine or a placebo, but says she did get a sore arm and a fever.
I was like, oh, I don't feel so good. And she's like, yes.
Since getting those shots, Anita's feeling just fine. Moderna plans to ask the FDA for the green light in early June. Tonight, across the country, a race to boost vaccinations by rewarding Americans who get the shot. Colorado, now the 6th state to announce a vaccine lottery.
That's right. You could win $1 million.
Eva Pilgrim joins us now. We've been talking about breakthrough infections. Of course, the COVID cases after someone is fully vaccinated, they are certainly rare, but it sounds like we have some new numbers out on that tonight.
Yeah, the CDC releasing new data on those numbers showing the breakthrough infection rate among fully vaccinated people just 0.01%. That means of the 101 million people that they followed, there were just over 10,000 breakthrough cases, and most of those had mild or no symptoms, Lindsay.
And the CDC director today had a holiday warning for those who haven't been vaccinated.
Yeah, the CDC director was very clear that if you have not been vaccinated, you are still at risk for COVID-19, and you should take all of those precautions that we have been saying for more than a year now. Wear your mask, social distance, and if you can, stay outside with your loved ones. Lindsay.
Eva Pilgrim, our thanks to you. Joining us now is Republican Governor Mike DeWine of Ohio. Governor, thanks so much for joining us.
Good to be with you. Thank you.
So, of course, your state is in an all-out push to make sure that people get vaccinated. And tomorrow the plan is to announce the winner of the $1 million vaccine lottery. Why did you decide that a lottery was necessary?
You know, our way out of this pandemic is clearly through the vaccine. And the more people we can get vaccinated, the faster we can get them vaccinated, the faster we're going to get completely out of this. And we were seeing, as a lot of the country was seeing, a real downturn in the number of people getting vaccinated. The people who had wanted it basically have gotten it. We had the Johnson & Johnson pulled off the market, and once that happened, it really slowed down and was going down in Ohio. So we just kind of scratched our heads to think, what can we do to increase the uptake? And came up with the idea of the lottery, wanted to get some excitement out there, and it's really gone better than I could have even ever imagined. A 45% increase in the number of people getting vaccinated. The group that we've seen the biggest increase in, it's interesting, is 16 and 17-year-olds, because we're offering not only $1 million for adults, but for those under 18, they have a chance at a 4-year scholarship at any of our great state universities in Ohio. That's room, board, and tuition. So great deal of excitement there. We've seen among that group, 16 and 17-year-olds, a 94% increase in them getting the vaccination. And our rural areas, where sometimes we've seen a real problem in getting people vaccinated, those have increased dramatically. Our top 10 rural counties, for example, that have increased the vaccination after we put out this lottery, they've seen over 100% increase. So we're excited.
It sounds like a significant uptick. What's the total percentage of your state who've been vaccinated at this point?
Yeah, you know, we're, I think, at about, if you look at total population, we're at about 44%. We're obviously above 50 if you look at just at the adult population. So we've got a ways to go. I mean, we've done well. A lot of people have been vaccinated, but if we truly want to get back to normal, we've got to have more people get vaccinated.
Now, state lawmakers in Ohio have called this a frivolous use of taxpayer dollars and want to introduce legislation to block it. What's your response to that?
Well, I know that people have said, look, this is a waste of money. But the real waste is at this point in the pandemic, when we have a vaccine to save people's lives, that will save people's lives, the real waste is for somebody to die at this point in the pandemic. A death today is just senseless. And we know that the more people we get vaccinated and the quicker we get them vaccinated, the faster we can get back to normal and the more lives that we're going to save.
And similarly, I'd be curious what you would say to critics who say, look, this is pretty tone deaf, considering that there are so many countries around the world who don't have access yet, and here we are needing to incentivize our residents.
Well, look, my obligation is to the people of the state of Ohio. I think what the president has done with some excess vaccine and sending it to other countries, I think is fine. I think that we have an obligation to take care of our own people in this country, and it's not going to be too long until we've really driven this virus down. So the faster we can do that, I think the better it is for everyone.
And lastly, as Ohio begins to return to normal and schools reopen fully, what's your advice to parents who have children who are under the age of 12 who still don't have access to vaccines? Well, I believe, based on what I'm seeing, that by fall, they're going to have the opportunity to get their children vaccinated. That's what we hope. The trials are already going on now. And I would simply say to any parent, whether they have a teenager now who is eligible or whether in the future that child is eligible, go with the science. Talk to your own doctor. Listen to what they tell you. And the risk of getting the vaccine is so much less than the risk of not getting it and ending up getting the virus. The virus is still out there. It still spreads in Ohio. It still spreads across this country. So there's a danger out there. And we're really seeing, you see a big difference today between those Ohioans who are vaccinated, who can go about their business, who can enjoy life, who can enjoy their family, versus those who are not vaccinated, who still have a serious risk whenever they do anything. Well, good luck to the lucky winner tomorrow. Governor of Ohio, Mike DeWine, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you talking with us. Thank you. Tonight, the mother of that arrested blogger in the custody of Belarus is speaking out and begging for help, claiming authorities will kill her son. This as the outrage over what's being called a state-sponsored hijacking continues to grow. Patrick Reevell has this report.
Tonight, a desperate plea from the mother of detained Belarusian blogger Roman Protasevich.
If they don't do something, they will simply kill him. They will kill him.
This video, released yesterday, showed the 26-year-old for the first time since he was arrested at the airport in Minsk Sunday. In the video, aired by Belarusian state TV, he appears to be reading a prepared statement where he said he was going to make a confession and was being treated well.
I know how my child looks. I know the features of his face. And so what they have forced him to say, that they have not done any violence to him, that is a total lie.
His mother, Natalia, says makeup has been applied to cover bruising around her son's eyes. She says his nose is bent, maybe broken, and she fears there are strangulation marks on his neck. There has been a furious reaction from the international community. European countries on Monday agreeing to sanction Belarus for what they call the hijacking of the Ryanair flight that Protasevich was aboard. The flight took off from Athens on Sunday with some 120 passengers on board, bound for Lithuania. But while over Belarus, the plane made a sudden U-turn, Belarusian air traffic controllers warning the Ryanair pilots of a potential security threat and directing them to land immediately. A MiG-29 fighter jet was sent to escort the commercial airliner. But once on the ground in the Belarusian capital, it became clear there was no bomb. Belarusian agents detained Pratasevich and his 23-year-old girlfriend, Sofia Sapega.
The dog was more here to cover their excuse, but the fact is they just wanted to arrest a man, so they impacted the day of all of more than hundreds of people.
The extraordinary incident prompted European countries Monday to also ban Belarusian airlines from Europe and to tell European airlines to avoid Belarusian airspace. EU Council President Charles Michel tweeting out this image showing virtually no flights over Belarus. President Biden in a statement calling the hijacking and detention of Pratasevich a direct affront to international norms. The young blogger grabbed the attention of Belarus's dictator Alexander Lukashenko for creating a news channel on the popular messaging app Telegram. The channel played a crucial role in the mass protests against Lukashenko last year that were triggered by a presidential election that international observers said was heavily rigged. The channel also helping document brutal violence against protesters.
He simply showed the truth. He simply showed the whole world, not only the Belarusian people, but the whole world. He showed what is happening, the unfairness of these elections.
Lukashenko, a close ally of Vladimir Putin, survived the protests, and now he's been moving to smash all opposition. Dozens of journalists are facing arrest and trial in Belarus. These pro-democracy protesters appearing in court today to be sentenced. The international response to Pratasevich's detention is more intense than anything before, but European countries' options for pressuring Lukashenko are limited. In the meantime, Pratasevich's parents are watching helplessly, desperate to free their son, knowing that he's in the hands of a brutal dictatorship.
I ask with a mother's tears, a mother's heart. Hear me, please. Save him. Help me.
Patrick Reevell for ABC News.
Our thanks to Patrick for that. And when we come back, the grand jury reportedly convened in the legal cases facing former President Trump as he is claiming absolute immunity in a January 6th lawsuit. We'll explain. The new report looking into thousands of instances of unruly passengers and the looming crackdown in the skies. But up next, our closer look at how the events of one day in Minneapolis led to international protests and calls for change.
With so much at stake, so much on the line, more Americans turn here than any other newscast. ABC News World News Tonight with David Muir.
We have made it through another week together.
America's #1 most watched newscast across all of television.
Admit it, these days, what you need to know
seems to change just about every day.
What is it that you really want to know, need to know?
To help you not just get through your day,
but to make the most of it. Feel smarter.
Feel better.
Feel happier.
Well, how about a third hour of Good Morning America in the afternoon?
GMA 3, what you need to know. Lunchtime at 1 Eastern, 12 Central and Pacific on ABC. It's all about you.
Robin Roberts, George Stephanopoulos, Michael Strahan. Wake up with America's #1 most watched morning show. ABC's
Good Morning America.
The world may feel out of your control, but your happiness doesn't have to be. Learn the secrets to happiness. Listen to the 10% Happier podcast, free on Apple Podcasts.
ABC News honored winner for the second straight year with the Edward R. Murrow Award for Overall Excellence in Television. ABC News, America's #1 news source. Friday nights, 9/8 Central. True crime, cinematic, real-life drama, stunning, the unthinkable. Follow the clues. The Hunt. True Crime 2020. Friday nights, 9/8 Central on ABC.
The reality is our country can collapse from within.
You see the white power movement on the march. Klansmen and neo-Nazis, skinheads, it's meant to incite war.
From the KKK to Oklahoma City to Charlottesville, the new documentary event special.
We just need to start talking about race.
Homegrown hate, the war among us.
This is a real wake-up call.
Streaming now on ABC News Live.
Now, when it matters most, the straightforward facts. ABC News is America's #1 news. Good Morning America, #1 in the morning, 9 years running. World News Tonight night with David Muir. #1 in the evening with America's most watched newscast. 2020, the #1 news magazine on Friday nights. The View, the #1 daytime talk show. And ABC News Live, #1 in streaming news. ABC News is America's #1 news.
The New York Appellate Court heard arguments over the need for a public inquiry into the 2014 death of Eric Gardner. You may recall his last words, "I can't breathe," helped to galvanize the Black Lives Matter movement. A lower court already ruled that the family has endured, quote, nearly 7 years of false promises about transparency from top city officials. New York City is fighting the inquiry, stating that the incident is already well documented. It has been 1 year since George Floyd's death, which sparked a global conversation around social injustice. Our TJ Holmes takes a closer look at how one day in America led to demands for change.
George Floyd lived life like most of us. He made good choices and some bad choices. He tried to be good to people. And on that day, he was mostly minding his own business on the day that he was killed. For this generation of Americans, this will be their Emmett Till moment. They will never forget the summer of 2020, the death of George Floyd.
We lived in the CUNY homes. It was the projects. It was the housing authority, low income. It was a rough neighborhood. But to me, it's like, is life.
At the heart of George's family was his mother, Miss Sissy.
He loved his mom, and his mom loved him too, and it was no secret. Everybody knew.
George and my mom, as you watched them, that Love and Happiness song with Al Green, they used to always play the music. Love and Happiness. He would literally pick her up and dance with her to that song. And my mom would just smile. George was special, and he used to always be able to go places and people would fall in love with him just like that.
Douglas Elementary was listed as the 5th poorest school in Houston ISD. The boys and girls would write an essay on what I want to be when I grow up. When I grow up, I want to be a Supreme Court judge. When people say, "Your Honor, he did rob the bank," I will say, "Be seated." He was a good student. He was a really quiet student until he got on the playground.
Floyd, he was good in football and basketball.
That's his territory. Nobody can mess with him on the court.
I remember they threw him a pass. He jumped up, extended his body all the way out, caught the ball, and he ballerina tapped in the back of the end zone.
Floyd's scholarship offer brought promise to them projects more than people even know.
George would be the first in his family to go to college, but he'd be back home within 2 years.
The police used to do sweeps in the CUNY homes. I thought they just did that in every community.
He would have trouble with the law. The most serious arrest, aggravated robbery. He pled guilty and served 4 years.
It goes from not just you losing your career and your future, it goes to now fighting to have freedom in any parts of your life.
I met Big Floyd at the time he was out of prison. We needed somebody who was a gatekeeper, who people respected and who could open doors. And Big Floyd was that person for us. What I saw with Big Floyd was redemption. He was using the fact that he was an OG in the neighborhood and was helping young men everywhere from 5 to 50 walk that path.
Our young generation is clearly lost, man. Clearly lost, man. Like one day it's gonna be you and God. You going up or you going down. You know what I'm saying?
But there were internal battles, and George made the decision to follow a well-known path to seek help. Locals call it going to Minneapolis.
He needed to get away from the environment. He needed that change. He wanted to just be a better man and a better father. you know. And he did it.
He used to call me Buttercup because I was his baby. And that we had all the happy memories together.
George attended a treatment program, worked security jobs, tried trucking school, but struggles would come.
Minneapolis is known for having some of the steepest disparities between black and white residents, really white and everybody else.
Minnesota nice. How ironic, right?
A year before he died, George faced a crushing loss.
His mother's death took a toll on him. He didn't know how to handle that.
This faithful man was devastated at the time. Like he was weakened.
And then came COVID. George, like so many Americans, would be laid off and contract the virus.
When he came to stop by, they just told me, you know, struggling a little bit. Yeah.
And violent deaths like those of Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery were anguishing communities.
By the time we're on the cusp of Memorial Day, people just want relief from the psychological trauma of everything that they've been feeling.
On that holiday Monday, in Cup Foods, George's alleged use of a counterfeit bill, just $20, would ultimately lead to the police being called.
You know, he started hearing commotions. George is again on the ground pleading, you know, for his life.
Mr. Floyd saying he can't breathe. The officer saying he can breathe if he can talk. It's not true.
Once you just get him up, he's not resisting arrest. You have him handcuffed. I kept voicing my concerns for George, you know, to the police. No response. I watched this man murder another man that looked like me for no reason.
That was a modern-day lynching.
Then when I heard him say, "Mama," like, that's when it got real with me.
And people all around the world seen that video, and they was like, where's the humanity? They was like, no, you're not gonna sweep this under the rug. We're gonna march.
Our thanks to TJ Holmes for that. And tonight we hope that you'll join us for a special Soul of a Nation broadcast after Floyd, the year that shook the world, tonight at 10 p.m., 9 Central, streaming everywhere tomorrow on Hulu. Still ahead on Prime tonight, the Georgia lawmaker condemned by House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy days after she compared vaccination passports to the Holocaust and her fiery response. The cheese-loving alleged drug dealer and the photo that landed him behind bars. And how many police-involved deaths have happened since the George Floyd incident? We take a look by the numbers. But first, our tweet of the day. The Minnesota Vikings releasing some of this video as several of their players visited the site where Floyd lost his life.
I know what happened, and I'm not guilty.
Why the fascination with criminal trials? Figure out what's really out there.
She revealed she had murdered his family.
I know in my heart they did this.
It's the time of suspicion.
The ending's really tough.
You don't know whether truth is going to be difficult to find unless you try to find it. The reality is our country can collapse from within.
You see the white power movement on the march. Klansmen and neo-Nazis, skinheads, it's meant to incite war.
From the KKK to Oklahoma City to Charlottesville, the new documentary event special.
We just need to start talking about race.
Homegrown hate, the war among us.
This is a real wake-up call.
Streaming now on ABC News Live.
Admit it. These days, what you need to know
seems to change just about every day.
What is it that you really want to know, need to know?
To help you not just get through your day,
but to make the most of it. Feel smarter.
Feel better.
Feel happier.
Well, how about a third hour of Good Morning America in the afternoon?
GMA 3, what you need to know. Lunchtime at 1 Eastern, 12 Central and Pacific on ABC. It's all about you.
24 hours, assault on the Capitol. The ABC News original, exclusively on Hulu. Now streaming. With so much at stake, so much on the line, more Americans turn here than any other newscast. ABC News World News Tonight with David Muir.
We have made it through another week together.
America's #1 most watched newscast across all of television.
The world may feel out of your control, but your happiness doesn't have to be. Learn the secrets to happiness. Listen to the 10% Happier podcast, free on Apple Podcasts.
Robin Roberts, George Stephanopoulos, Michael Strahan. Wake up with America's #1 most watched morning show. ABC's
Good Morning America.
ABC News honored winner for the second straight year with the Edward R. Murrow Award for Overall Excellence in Television. ABC News, America's #1 news source.
Welcome back, everyone. The murder of George Floyd a year ago certainly shined a bright spotlight on police killings in America. But have we seen any change since then? We take a look by the numbers. 414 people have been killed by the police in the U.S. so far in 2021, according to Mapping Police Violence. Sadly, that means we're on track to closely match the 1,127 police killings reported in all of 2020. Just 6, that's how many days in 2021 have passed without a police killing somewhere in America. At least 64, that's how many people were killed by police during the 3-week murder trial of Derek Chauvin, including Dante Wright, who was shot about 10 miles from the Chauvin trial courthouse. For an average of 3 police killings a day, according to analysis by the New York Times. And 6 people were killed by police within 24 hours of the Chauvin verdict, according to the AP. 16-year-old Makia Bryant was among them. And we still have lots ahead here on Prime tonight. More than a dozen tornadoes reported in just Kansas in the last 24 hours, and a severe storm threat that's now heading east. Actor John Cena facing fierce backlash and apologizing after comments he made about Taiwan. We'll explain. And how do we move forward and teach our children about the tumultuous year since George Floyd was killed? But first, a look at our top trending stories on abcnews.com.
Guide you through it all tonight. We have made it through another week together.
Big hug,
We tell all our patients how much they're loved. We hold their hands.
David, we're showing our love and support for all the ICU staff.
They're the heroes in this.
Now, when it matters most, the straightforward facts. ABC News is America's #1 news. Good Morning America, #1 in the morning, 9 years running. World News Tonight with David Muir, #1 in the evening with America's most watched newscast. 2020, the #1 news magazine on Friday nights. The View, the #1 daytime talk show. And ABC News Live, #1 in streaming news. ABC News is America's #1 news.
The world may feel out of your control, but your happiness doesn't have to be. Learn the secrets to happiness. Listen to the 10% Happier podcast, free on Apple Podcasts.
ABC News honored winner for the second straight year with the Edward R. Murrow Award for Overall Excellence in Television. ABC News, America's #1 news source.
This is GMA 3, what you need to know. GMA 3.
A third hour of Good Morning America in the afternoon.
It's all about you. Lunchtime on ABC.
The reality is our country can collapse from within.
White lives matter.
You see the white power movement on the march.
You will not replace us!
Klansmen and neo-Nazis, skinheads, it's meant to incite war.
From the KKK to Oklahoma City to Charlottesville, the new documentary event special.
We just need to start talking about race.
Homegrown hate, the war among us.
This is a real wake-up call.
Streaming now on ABC News Live.
Friday nights, 9/8 Central. True crime, cinematic, real-life drama, stunning, the unthinkable. Follow the clues. The Hunt. True crime. 2020. Friday nights, 9/8 Central on ABC.
The most powerful stories of our time, anytime. Nightline.
At the White House on the anniversary of George Floyd's death, the Floyd family met with President Biden to discuss the latest on police reform.
Today is about the remembrance of our brother George Floyd, father, uncle, friend, cousin.
Being here today is an honor, to meet with the president and the vice president and for them to show their concern to our family.
A measure passed by the House is now in the Senate with Democratic Senator Cory Booker and GOP Senator Tim Scott working on sticking points.
The fundamentals of this bill has to be greater transparency in American policing, greater accountability in American policing, and then when bad things happen, officers have to be held accountable.
If you can make federal laws to protect the bird, which is the bald eagle, you can make federal laws to protect people of color.
Following the Colonial Pipeline hack, pipeline operators will now be required to report cyber intrusions to federal agencies. The company faced criticism for not promptly reporting the hack.
For 5 days, we heard nothing from top Republicans. They're now denouncing Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene for comparing the House's COVID safety rules to the treatment of Jews in Nazi Germany. In a podcast on Thursday, Taylor Greene equated the wearing of masks to the gold stars that the Nazis forced Jews to wear. Today, House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy called that comparison appalling. Senate GOP leader Mitch McConnell also spoke out.
This is one of the frequent outbursts that are absolutely outrageous and reprehensible.
Greene stands by what she said.
With more and more Americans taking to the skies, the FAA says there's been an alarming increase in alleged unruly passenger incidents.
We don't stand up, it's only going to get worse.
The FAA receiving about 2,500 reports of unruly passengers since the start of the year. The overwhelming majority, some 1,900, refusing to wear masks. Now tonight, a stern warning from the nation's top Homeland Security official.
It is a federal mandate that one must wear a mask in an airport, on the aircraft itself, and we will not tolerate behavior that violates the law.
It wasn't hearing John Cena speaking Mandarin that made news. It was what he said. Apologizing to the people of China after saying Taiwan would be the first country to be able to watch his upcoming film, Fast and Furious 9. The actor and former professional wrestler didn't exactly say what he was apologizing for, but it was clear enough. China doesn't consider Taiwan an independent state. Beijing's so-called One China policy, a tricky subject many other celebrities, politicians, and businesses have found difficulty navigating.
Police say a drug dealer's love of cheese got him busted. Police in the UK arrested the 39-year-old after he sent a photo of himself holding a block of blue Stilton cheese. Now, they were able to intercept the picture, which was sent on an encrypted messaging service called EncroChat, a service drug dealers apparently use to coordinate sales. But get this, authorities could analyze his fingerprints from the photo. Well, it led to drug bust for selling cocaine, heroin, and other drugs, and now he's serving more than 13 years in prison.
We have new developments tonight in the investigation into former President Trump and his family business. The Manhattan District Attorney has now convened a special grand jury to decide whether to bring criminal charges. Sources are now telling ABC News. Let's bring in our chief Washington correspondent, Jonathan Karl. John, this development does mean the investigation has reached a more advanced stage. So what do we know at this point?
Well, it certainly seems like an escalation of the investigation. And what we have heard, Lindsay, is that prosecutors have actually already contacted witnesses to appear before this special grand jury. And while this body will be hearing other cases as well, this is the grand jury that would determine whether or not there are criminal charges filed against the former president, his family, or his company. Obviously, there have been no charges filed yet. This grand jury is going to be meeting for up to 6 months, 3 days a week, reportedly. That Trump himself has not responded to this news yet, but of course he has said many times in the past that he runs a clean business and that this entire investigation is a political witch hunt run by a district attorney, Cy Vance, who is a Democrat. Lindsay?
And you said he didn't respond to that, but today the former president did respond to a lawsuit brought against him by Congressman Eric Swalwell over his role in the January 6th Capitol riot. How's he responding to that?
Well, in a court filing, the former president declared absolute immunity from the charges, absolute immunity, because he is saying anything that he said leading up to the events of January 6th were protected by his First Amendment rights. So he is responding to that with the phrase absolute immunity. We'll see what the court says.
We shall see. All right, Jonathan Karl, our thanks to you. Tonight, a severe weather threat is heading east. With it, damaging winds, large hail, and possible tornadoes. 15 reported tornadoes in just the past 24 hours in Kansas alone. This one in Selden, Kansas. Debris from shredded buildings swirling around in the air. Chief Meteorologist Ginger Z is tracking the storm for us. Good evening, Ginger.
Lindsay, good evening to you. You know, we have a powerful cold front that's making its way all the way from the upper peninsula of Michigan, draped all the way to New Mexico and Arizona. But it is firing storms up in those severe thunderstorm watches yet tonight. So you end up having Wisconsin, like Wausau, Childress, and Abilene all impacted. Then I wanted to show you what's going to happen as this moves east. It's really anybody from Cleveland and Pittsburgh all the way through eastern Pennsylvania into much of New York and New England that are going to see the potential for 70-plus mile-per-hour winds. It's going to feel hot and steamy ahead of it, very much like it does before it storms. But just keep that in mind that these storms tomorrow afternoon and evening in the Northeast could turn severe. Lindsay.
All right, we will be on the lookout for that. Ginger Z, our thanks to you. And before we go tonight, we are hearing from the young woman who shot the infamous video of George Floyd's last moments that shocked the world. In an honest and emotional written statement tonight, Darnella Frazier said in part, "A lot of people call me a hero, even though I don't see myself as one. I was just in the right place at the right time. Behind this smile, behind these awards, behind the publicity, I'm a girl trying to heal from something I am reminded of every day. Everyone talks about the girl who recorded George Floyd's death, but to actually be her is a different story. Not only did this affect me, my family too. We all experience change, my mom the most. I strive every day to be strong for her because she was strong for me when I couldn't be strong for myself. Even though this was a traumatic, life-changing experience for me, I'm proud of myself. If it weren't for my video, the world wouldn't have known the truth. I own that. My video didn't save George Floyd, but it put his murder away and off the streets." And before we go tonight, our image of the day. Take a look at this. These are the headstones in the Say Their Name Cemetery memorializing Black Americans killed by police, George Floyd's name among them. What remains to be seen is if his death will lead to substantive changes in the law. And that is our show for this hour. Be sure to stay tuned to ABC News Live for more context and analysis of the day's top stories. Thanks so much for streaming with us. Coming up in the next hour, staying on top of several things. Of course, we continue to track the events tied to the one-year mark of George Floyd's death. And our exclusive conversation with the stars of Friends, what they have to say about their highly anticipated reboot. Stay with us.
Now, when it matters most, the straightforward facts. ABC News is America's #1 news. Good Morning America, #1 in the morning, 9 years running. World News Tonight with David Muir, #1 in the evening with America's most watched newscast. 2020, the #1 news magazine on Friday nights. The View, the #1 daytime talk show. And ABC News Live, #1 in streaming news. ABC News is America's #1 news.
The most powerful stories of our time, anytime. Nightline.
Friday nights, 9/8 Central. True crime, cinematic, real-life drama, stunning, the unthinkable. Follow the clues, The Hunt. True crime, 2020. Friday nights, 9/8 Central on ABC.
The reality is our country can collapse from within.
You see the white power movement on the march. Klansmen and neo-Nazis, skinheads, it's meant to incite war.
From the KKK to Oklahoma City to Charlottesville, the new documentary event special.
We just need to start talking about race.
Homegrown Hate, The War Among Us.
This is a real wake-up call.
Streaming now on ABC News Live.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Lindsay Davis. Thank you so much for streaming with us. We're monitoring several developments here at ABC News at this hour. A major milestone announced today in our nation's battle against COVID-19. More than half of U.S. adults are fully vaccinated against the deadly virus. In more good news, the CDC says that 0.01% of fully vaccinated people experience breakthrough infections, majority of which had mild or no symptoms at all. But the CDC director giving a clear warning to the unvaccinated ahead of the holiday weekend, saying, quote, you remain at risk. Speaking of holiday travel, TSA is expecting to screen 6 million people this weekend. According to the travel booking app Hopper, the top domestic destinations are Las Vegas, Miami, and Orlando. When it comes to international travels, Americans are headed to Cancun, Cabo, and Montego Bay, clearly in search of some much-needed fun in the sun. A celebration of life ceremony was held for George Floyd in Minneapolis, as today, of course, marks 1 year since his death. His family met privately with President Biden at the White House. Floyd's brother expressed frustration with Congress's delay in passing a police reform bill named after George Floyd. Negotiations in Congress continue, meanwhile, on a bipartisan policing reform bill, with both sides expressing optimism on a deal despite some key differences on the scope of the reform. But as talks go on, some cities and states are taking action on their own. Here's senior White House correspondent Mary Bruce.
Tonight, negotiators on Capitol Hill say they are finally making progress on police reform. Republican Senator Tim Scott telling us we're starting to see a framework.
I think we're making the kind of progress that we need to make in them.
Tonight, President Biden sounding encouraged, too.
I've spoken with the negotiators. I'm hopeful that sometime after Memorial Day, we'll have an agreement on the George Floyd legislation. So I'm optimistic.
Biden had hoped to sign a law by today, the anniversary of George Floyd's murder, something he discussed in his meeting with Floyd's family at the White House.
He said that deadline, he's not happy about it not being met, but all in all, he just wants the bill to be right and meaningful and that it holds George's legacy intact.
The George Floyd policing bill would ban police chokeholds, eliminate the use of no-knock warrants, and create a national registry of police misconduct. But the big sticking point, whether to do away with protections that shield officers from civil lawsuits. 40 states in the District of Columbia have already passed their own significant police reforms. Maryland now has new laws restricting use of force and requiring body cameras. Michael Harrison is the police commissioner in Baltimore.
It's a culture change. It's a paradigm shift, and it's new to a lot of people. We're 4 years into it.
Have you found some resistance, or do you feel that everyone is in agreement on the common cause here?
Well, in the beginning, like anything, people people reject what they fear, and they fear what they don't know. And so in the beginning, it's all about change management. How do we create change?
Our thanks to Mary Bruce for that. And now to the latest on the coronavirus pandemic. Things are slowly starting to return to normal here in the U.S. with COVID-19 numbers down and vaccinations steadily on the rise. And the nation's two largest school districts are now planning on returning to in-person learning starting with the fall. ABC's Rena Roy has the latest on that.
A major milestone in the fight against COVID-19. The White House telling ABC more than half of American adults ages 18 and older will soon be fully vaccinated.
Thanks to vaccines, tens of millions of Americans are able to get back to something closer to normal.
States getting creative to keep those vaccinations up. Ohio's Vaccination lottery has prompted nearly 3 million people to sign up for shots. Moderna now joining Pfizer, saying its vaccine is effective in kids 12 and older, with plans to ask the FDA for emergency use authorization next month.
Their clinical trials in teens ages 12 to 15 showed 100% efficacy and 0 serious safety signals.
Promising signs as students get ready to go back into classrooms come fall.
The last 14 months put a stark spotlight on how nothing can replace the importance of the in-person educator in class with his or her students.
New York City public schools plan to fully reopen, with students and staff required to mask up. Schools will follow CDC social distancing guidelines, desks 3 feet apart. Remote learning no longer an option.
Every single child will be back in the classroom.
Los Angeles also expected to resume in-person learning 5 days a week, but online learning will still be available for those who need it for health reasons.
Our thanks to Rena Roy for that. A controversial new gun bill in Texas is taking aim at easing already loose restrictions for residents who want to purchase a handgun. The legislation would allow people to carry a handgun without a license and the background check and training that goes along with it. Supporters say it's in the name of safety, but opponents of the bill say it's a big mistake. Here's ABC's Andrew Dimber.
People in Texas are one step closer to enjoying looser restrictions on guns. State lawmakers passing a bill Monday allowing eligible people to carry a handgun openly or concealed without getting a license or without any training. The governor now expected to sign the bill, which also includes stiffer penalties for felons caught illegally carrying guns.
This bill is about common law-abiding citizens being able to carry commonly owned handguns in common public places.
Emotional opposition came from State Representative Joe Moody, who represents El Paso, where a gunman killed 23 people at a Walmart in 2019.
One day, a tragedy will come to your community because we fail to be responsible to the members of our communities across this state. I pray that it doesn't, but it is.
Right now, to get a gun license in Texas, you need to sit through a training class that costs $100 and pass a shooting test and a written test. Gun instructor Johnny Price has been licensing people across Texas since 2008. He says the training, which is no longer being required, is crucial for safety.
So they understand how to handle that handgun, the proper way to handle it so that they don't get hurt or hurt somebody else by accident.
Some police officials are also critical of the bill, saying it will make their jobs more difficult.
You have to have training to do CPR. So if you're going to, have a license to save a life, you need a license to take one.
Our thanks to Andrew. And now it's what so many have been waiting for, nearly 2 decades since the Emmy-winning sitcom Friends went off the air. The gang is all back together once again. Our Amy Robach got a chance to sit down exclusively with the cast ahead of their highly anticipated reunion.
Did you get off the plane? Did you get off the plane?
I got off the plane.
For 10 years and 235 episodes.
I'm afraid the TV guide comes to Chenandeler Bomb.
I knew that! Rachel, use your head.
They were the friends we could all depend on to make us laugh.
I just want to be married again.
The final episode breaking records with more than 50 million viewers.
This is harder than I thought it would be.
Oh, it's gonna be okay.
Season after season, millions tuning in. The show and its stars becoming pop culture phenoms.
Oh, I just can't watch. It's too scary.
It's the one we've all been waiting for.
Does Courtney still have her lines written on the table?
We've literally just slipped right back.
Our 6 favorite friends together again for a special airing on HBO Max. The first time all 6 cast members have been together in one room in 17 years.
We were on a break!
I don't think that any of us had any idea how emotional we would be when we walked onto the set. To see it exactly the way it was, literally besides the cookie jar that Lisa took home
and the neon
coffee thing that Jen took. Besides that, it was exactly the same, and it was so emotional that we just started crying.
I knew it was going to be really seriously emotional experience, and it has been.
I know you can't give away any secrets, but can you give us an idea of what we're going to see?
There's some really
fun
entertaining surprises.
Yeah, there's a lot of fun surprises.
We're going to hear from Janice.
Janice?
Oh my God! We won't give away any secrets, but we loved all the guest stars that we had.
For 10 seasons, 236 episodes, Friends becoming part of the pop culture zeitgeist.
He's her lobster.
Millions tuning in for the comedic exploits of Monica, Chandler, Phoebe, Joey, and of course, our favorite on-again, off-again couple, Ross and Rachel.
Look at me! I'm Chandler. Could I be wearing any more clothes?
Anyone have a favorite episode?
The one where everybody finds out.
She knows!
That was my favorite episode.
That episode where everybody finds out about Chandler and Monica's relationship.
They don't know that we know they know we know.
Not just a fan favorite, but a cast favorite too.
Look, I did love the one where everybody finds out.
Yes.
Because I had very fun things to do.
Right. That was a good one.
I really like the one with the blackout. What?
And I like doing the routine.
5, 6, 7, 8.
That was fun. Oh, the routine was so funny.
No, you didn't. I did. No.
Do you have a best blooper moment?
Oh my gosh, there's so many of those.
For me, I always think of the one where Joey and Ross are sneaking around trying to take nap.
What lines do fans say to you?
How you doing? I get quite a bit of how you doing. I get quite a bit of
I just get smelly cat.
Smelly cat, smelly cat. What are they feeding you? Smelly cat. Smelly, really bad. Smelly, smelly cat.
We were on a break.
We were on a break!
Do you guys watch the reruns?
Yeah, Court and I watched it the other day just to catch up on
And
some stuff.
laughed and cried. Their first kiss, Ross and Rachel, that was so powerful.
She was in tears.
That was good. I'm going to watch more now.
Now she will.
I am going to now.
She decided it's a really good show when she was seeing us all together. So you're watching it for the first time.
So she's going to binge watch Friends.
So what to expect from this homecoming decades in the making? Well, the cast tells us a few laughs, some games, and a colossal dose of nostalgia.
The truth is, I didn't cry walking on to the set.
Then we cried.
Today you can't stop her. And now I can't stop.
Yeah, the cork has been pulled and the floodgates open.
We wanted to do it a year ago, give back to everyone, to all the fans, especially in the dark times we were all experiencing. Hopefully, a year later, people will still enjoy it and cheer the same folks up.
Lots of tears and laughter. Our thanks to Amy for that. And still to come, the billowing smoke from a container ship that caught fire off Sri Lanka. What we're learning tonight about injuries.
With so much at stake, so much on the line, more Americans turn here than any other newscast. ABC News World News Tonight with David Muir.
We have made it through another week together.
America's #1 most watched newscast across all of television.
Admit it, these days, what you need to know
seems to change just about every day.
What is it that you really want to know, need to know?
To help you not just get through your day,
But to make the most of it. Feel smarter.
feel better.
Feel happier.
Well, how about a third hour of Good Morning America in the afternoon?
GMA 3, what you need to know. Lunchtime at 1 Eastern, 12 Central and Pacific on ABC. It's all about you.
Robin Roberts, George Stephanopoulos, Michael Strahan. Wake up with America's #1 most watched morning show, ABC's
Good Morning America.
The world may feel out of your control, but your happiness doesn't have to be. Learn the secrets to happiness. Listen to the 10% Happier podcast, free on Apple Podcasts.
ABC News honored winner for the second straight year with the Edward R. Murrow Award for Overall Excellence in Television. ABC News, America's #1 news source. Friday nights, 9/8 Central. True crime, cinematic, real-life drama, stunning, the unthinkable. Follow the clues. The Hunt. True crime. 2020. Friday nights, 9/8 Central on ABC.
The reality is our country can collapse from within.
You see the white power movement on the march. Klansmen and neo-Nazis, skinheads, it's meant to incite war.
From the KKK to Oklahoma City to Charlottesville, the new documentary event special.
We just need to start talking about race.
Homegrown Hate, The War Among Us.
This is a real wake-up call.
Streaming now on ABC News Live.
Now, when it matters most, the straightforward facts. ABC News is America's #1 news. Good Morning America, #1 in the morning, 9 years running. World News Tonight with David Muir, #1 in the evening with America's most watched newscast. 2020, the #1 news magazine on Friday nights. The View, the #1 daytime talk show. And ABC News Live, #1 in streaming news. ABC News is America's #1 news.
Welcome back. We're tracking several international headlines at this hour. The White House has announced that President Biden will meet with Russian leader Vladimir Putin next month. The meeting will happen in Geneva during the tail end of his visits to the UK and Belgium for summits with G7 leaders. During the White House press briefing, Press Secretary Jen Psaki confirmed no preconditions were set for the meeting. A busy first day in the Middle East for Secretary of State Blinken, who met with Prime Minister Netanyahu as part of a tour aimed at ensuring the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas holds. The secretary announced new emergency funding for the Palestinian people, including for reconstruction in Gaza and the reopening of the U.S. consulate in Jerusalem for Palestinian issues. Israel also eased restrictions and allowed for the delivery of supplies into the Gaza Strip. Black smoke billowed out of a container ship that exploded off the coast of Sri Lanka. The ship was carrying cosmetics and 25 tons of hazardous nitric acid. Thankfully, there were no deaths, and according to the Sri Lankan Navy, only 2 crew members were injured. Please save my son, they will kill him. Those are the chilling words of the mother of a journalist from Belarus who was arrested by his own country's government after what critics are calling a state-sponsored hijacking. And we're finally hearing those scary moments when airline pilots were told to land because of a security threat. ABC's Martha Raddatz has more on this mother's desperate plea.
For the first time tonight, we hear the moment Ryanair pilots were told by air traffic controllers in Belarus there was a bomb on board the flight.
For security reasons, we recommend you to land and uniform.
The pilots head for Minsk airport, repeatedly questioning where this mid-air threat originated, almost in disbelief.
The bomb, where did it come from? Where did you find the information about it from?
Airport security staff informed they received email.
The plane landed, but it was clear there was no bomb. The opposition journalist Roman Protasevich was quickly taken away, his mother today desperately pleading for her son's life. I don't know, she says. If something isn't done, they will simply kill him. They will kill him. This after video of Protasevich played on state TV, the young journalist likely under duress, saying he was healthy, but his parents believe he had been beaten and his nose broken, covered by makeup in the video. And late today, pro-Belarusian government media releasing this video of Protasevich's girlfriend, Sofia Sapega, also likely under duress while detained. After massive protests last summer against the Belarusian president, ABC News documented horrific stories of severe beatings and torture. Protesters with bruises and broken bones mercilessly bloodied from clashes with authorities.
Martha Raddatz joins us now. Martha, we saw that video from the detention center where the detained journalist discusses being part of the opposition. What reporting do you have on that?
Well, he was part of the opposition. His channel, which was basically a message app, was really crucial in those mass protests. His mother today saying, however, he was reporting the truth, the real news. He never called for violence. She said she considers him a hero. But both Protasevich and his girlfriend remain in grave danger. Lindsay.
All right, Martha Raddatz, our thanks to you. The murder of George Floyd 1 year ago, of course, sparked important and often uncomfortable conversations about race and racism across the country. Tonight, we speak with Dr. Ibram X. Kendi, historian and best-selling author of How to Be an Anti-Racist Baby, and Stamped Racism, Anti-Racism, and You. He's now adapted Stamped for Kids, aiming to help young readers identify and stamp out racist thoughts in their daily lives. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Kendi.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be on the show.
So you want everyone, including children, to talk about race. Let's take a listen to a clip from the audiobook of Stamped for Kids, narrated by 9-year-old Peyton Rain Kem Jackson.
You may have been told not to talk about race, or been made to feel like you can't, as if it's some kind of bad word. But it's not. It shouldn't be. It can't be. Until we learn to talk about race, the poison of racism won't go away.
You know, people always say that kids don't see color. I've always thought that that's wrong, that kids do see color. They just don't tend to assign a value to it. Often it's adults who do that. My question to you is, how do you tailor your message to the younger audience while also keeping kids engaged in the very heavy topics that you often tackle in your book?
I think what was beautiful about Sonia Cherry Paul and the way she adapted this book, like Jason, adapted the Stamp Jr., is that they used language and they used experiences that kids can understand. They really met kids where they are. But what's also beautiful about kids is they have a moral clarity. And if you explain that something is wrong, they're going to want to know what it is, and they're going to want to know. They're going to want to know how to be a part of the efforts against it.
And you've certainly been a leader in the anti-racism movement. Would you say that since the death of George Floyd a year ago, more Americans have become anti-racists?
Well, I do think that more Americans are aware of the existence of racism. I do think more Americans are realizing it's hard for them as adults to have these conversations, to see and understand the problem. And I do think more people are aware that young people need to understand about racism, that the earlier we learn it, the earlier we'll be learning anti-racist ideas as opposed to growing up and having to unlearn so many ideas. And I'm hoping this awareness turns into action.
And you just mentioned the idea of the critical race theory in schools. You're obviously a big advocate for that. The idea is to understand and expose how racism is deeply embedded in American life and work to root it out. Were you surprised by the intense backlash to these teachings, which have become such a political flashpoint?
I was surprised in the sense that, why now? Why at this point? This is something that many courageous teachers have been teaching their students, just as they're teaching them, and they feel they need to be prepared for the world by understanding math or understanding science. They understand they must understand racism. But then again, with the growing awareness of adults, and when you become aware of racism, you also become aware of those who are behind racism. And so if you want to continue to project yourself as not racist, you're also not going to want people to understand racism, especially young people, because young people are not going to hold their tongue and they're going to tell you as it is.
I want to go one step further with that, because critics of critical race theory often say that too much focus on race becomes divisive, that it's not age appropriate for younger children, and that it can send white children the message that they're guilty just because of the color of their skin. I would assume that you would disagree with that, but are any of these concerns reasonable?
So let's think about this. We live in a society where certain people have more and other people have less. And typically, Black people have less. What are we teaching our children about why, let's say, Black people have less? Are we specifically teaching them that people do not have less because they are less? Are we specifically teaching that Black girl that there's nothing wrong with you because of the color of your skin? Are we specifically teaching that white boy there's nothing right about you because of the color of your skin? Because if we're not teaching those anti-racist ideas, if we're not teaching them that the problem is bad rules, not bad people, then what else are they going to think about all the racial inequality in our society? And so to me, not teaching our kids about race and racism is actually divisive.
Bad rules, not bad people. Lastly, on this milestone day, May 25th, just want to ask, do you feel like this country is moving in the right direction when it comes to exposing and stamping out racism?
So my research has actually found that throughout the course of history, we've been moving, a segment of this nation has been moving in the right direction, seeking to recognize the equality of difference, seeking to spread opportunities and resources for historically oppressed and marginalized people. But what's also been happening at the same time, and we're seeing this now, is there's been a move to simultaneously make it harder for people to vote, to make it harder for people to learn about race and racism in their schools, to make it harder for people to live healthy during a pandemic. And so really both are happening, and it's sort of this clash that always has existed, really, in the soul of this nation.
Dr. Kendi, we thank you so much for speaking with us. And Stamped for Kids, Racism, Anti-Racism, and You is now available wherever books are sold.
Thank you.
And before we go, from the U.S. embassies in Spain and Greece to peaceful protesters in Germany and London, the death of George Floyd 1 year later was acknowledged around the world. Many of those who turned out had one resounding message, that Black lives matter. And that is our show for tonight. Be sure to stay tuned to ABC News Live for more context and analysis of the day's top stories. I'm Lindsay Davis. Thank you so much for streaming with us. Have a great night.
I know what happened, and I'm not guilty.
Why the fact